I'm with my friend Matt Hugg, who's the president and founder of nonprofit.courses, and he's a bona fide expert in the way nonprofits work. He's taught classes and spoken at conferences and written articles about the subject. And I was interested in getting his feedback on a challenge that a lot of bankers face and are going to continue to face, particularly in this environment. And that's the question of contributions. A lot of bankers, rightly or wrongly, are concerned about how they should answer the question that might be posed by the director of a nonprofit. Are you willing to contribute to our organization? Do you have any recommendations, Matt, on how a banker ought to approach that?
Yeah, that's a real, that's a conundrum. Let's just face it, right? Because on a lot of levels, I mean, there's an ethical issue here, right? Of, you don't want it to look like something it isn't. On the other hand, it's a charitable organization that's in the community. I think number one, and I confess some bias on this, is that I do think that that banks should be contributors to the organizations that that they work with in terms of the business relationship, but how you do it and the level and all that can really, that's a good discussion point. And the reason I say that they should, just like any person should make a gift, because it shows an endorsement. Mm-hmm. Not only are they a customer, but we support them in the community. Now, how do you do that? A lot of organizations, banks included, have marketing budgets and they have philanthropic budgets. Mm-hmm. And the marketing budget tends to be smaller. Mm-hmm. It tends to be more locally controlled versus the philanthropic budget, which might rest in a foundation of some sort that's working, that's the bank's foundation. Or then in the bank's case, there's also funds that the bank controls distribution of that are legacy funds, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, again, usually at a different level. But on the marketing side, I think there's some really great opportunities there, and there is some return on investment. And that's another part of this too, is that banks can, and more than just putting your label on something, but the bank really ought to look for what kind of return they're getting on this. Mm-hmm. Is it, do you get more visibility? Is kind of an amorphous thing, and oh gee, we'll give you visibility. That's not always the best answer, but how's that relationship expanding your network? Mm-hmm. How's that relationship getting you in front of people or other organizations that can be customers, and how can you leverage that relationship by virtue of making that gift to just to give you more business in the bank? So that on a marketing basis, I think that's really important.
So if I can interject,
one
of the things that a lot of bankers sometimes run up against is, say, a large bank that has contributed massive amounts of money to the nonprofit. And it's unlikely that a community banker, for example, would ever be able to match what a large bank who has a much bigger budget could put into these. What you're suggesting is that part of the way a banker might think about this is to say, yes, we're interested in supporting your efforts to the extent that we can. There are a lot of ways we can do it. There certainly are ways that we're prepared to work with you as volunteers. So donating time,
right,
talent. That may be an area that the banker might say, if in fact this is true. I mean, the challenge is there are lots of very worthy nonprofits, maybe way too many in a lot of communities, and no budget probably is going to be able to accommodate all of them. So you have to think about the other ways you add value as a banker.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That be able to expand their network, even something as simple as within permission and ethical boundaries, to be able to say good things about an organization to other people in the community. Right. If it comes from the banker's mouth, folks really take that seriously. Like, oh, okay, they're good. Now, like I said, there's ethical issues there that you don't want to cross. You want to make sure that the organization is good with that, right? But even your presence as a volunteer is an endorsement for what they're doing. I mean, let's face it, nonprofits, particularly today, are in a real squeeze. When a business gives, if I sell something to you, you become a customer, I get revenue.
Mhm.
But in a nonprofit, if I provide my service, that's a bill
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that person who's getting the service probably is not paying the full amount of what that service costs, and so they have to look elsewhere for funds.
Mhm.
And so your ability to connect them to other funding sources, or even provide some funding yourself, is going to be huge for them. I mean, there's a reason why they're looking for this. It's not just it's
Absolutely.
about
So some of it might be, if you think about it individually, you can support the efforts either with your own financial
oh
contribution or your time or your talent. You can also support a nonprofit by sharing their message, letting people in the community know about the good things that this particular organization is doing.
yeah, and become their advocate not only in the community but within your bank.
Hmm.
So we talked about the marketing money. Well, if they go for the philanthropic dollars,
Hmm.
are you advocating for them at the levels to say, yeah, this is a good organization. They have, solid numbers. They're doing these things. They make us look good in the community. Are you helping them move forward? I
Hmm.
also like actually that you brought up the point about making a personal gift, because a lot of times, and this isn't just banks, this is all over the place, somebody will say, well, I'm here to represent, right? And they don't end up doing something themselves.
Hmm.
I think it's important that folks do something themselves, so that to show that they personally are engaged, as well as just being there because it's business.
Yeah.
Even if it's a little bit, that means a lot to the organization. That will raise the stature of your bank, but also your credibility in the organization by making your personal gift, as well as bringing the resources of the bank to bear.
So the answer to the question, would you be prepared to contribute, is yes. And we're also interested in trying to find other ways to support your mission, which could lead, again, we haven't talked about it, into the banking products and services that might be very appropriate in
Oh,
this new world that nonprofits are dealing with virtual conferences and perhaps more
yeah.
transactional business being conducted in ways that are different than they were historically.
I mean, even, you got a conference room, let them use it, right? I mean, even to that level, it's really important. You'd be surprised how those little things mean a lot to an organization.